everybody. Digital House. We have a special update again, Colin State. So we brought in a joke just so great. Hitters today. Got Mark.
Howdy.
Who's becoming kind of a regular.
Yeah. I just keep showing up in the mornings. Here at 6 a.m.
Like wanders along. And we're going to look at it of what does this mean for the let's just throw some November 8th was election day. In the House, it appears like the Republicans are going to take the House. They've been declared victors in 217 out of the 218 seats you need to have a majority in the House. There are 13 undecided races there. Interesting kind of in that dynamic of the Democrats picking up a Senate seat maybe, or at least holding it. Republicans barely taking the House. I think that's got them winning anywhere from kind of 8 to 12 seats. The Republicans did outpace the Democrats by 4% on just all votes cast across the nation. Then when you look at the governor's races, we've got 25 Republican governors. We've got 24 Democratic governors. The Republicans lost 2 seats. Dems obviously picked them up. You've got Alaska undecided that appears like it'll be a Republican seat, but we'll see. And then just some other races that had to do with the energy businesses. You had Wayne Christian win the Railroad Commission race here in Texas. He got 55%, which is kind of in line with what Abbott and Patrick got. And then another race we thought we'd talk a lot more about, but I'm not sure today, but the Arizona Corporation Commission, which really regulates the utility services, railroads, and pipelines in the state. 2 Republicans won there. So it went from being a Republican majority of 3-2 to 4-1 now. And so that's kind of the lay of the land on the facts of what happened to I'll go number 1 to you. It's Maine. We've got the sound breaking up again. We're good.
Okay. Oh, we're good. That one, as a relation of a lot of inertia, which is good, I think extends the super cycle that everybody continues to talk about. We've got physically tight supply and with demand that seems to be holding in okay. I think a push either way, either a rollback in regulation or a more aggressive push to limit access. I think that gridlock or inertia is a good thing for traditional energy in general, as somewhat counterintuitive as that might seem. I think it also, from a political standpoint, it points out, with the exception of a couple of the most notable results, and we can get to that later, is that running against with kind of a weak slate or a weak hand of candidates is not a winning strategy. I think we can all agree that the much ballyhooed and predicted red wave, tsunami, whatever you want to call it, did not occur. And I think that was largely running weak candidates on positions or platforms of running against the incumbents, particularly at the national level. So,
not to take us off track, but when I was a child, I went to visit one of my congressmen, and he said, "Go make yourself into something, and then come serve in the government." Today, though, I look at people like AOC. I look at even our one-eyed congressman here in Houston. Both sides of the party, AOC is worth $27 million. These guys are making, they walked into the government with worth worth nothing, and now they're worth millions. So why can't the Republicans find better candidates? Because if you get into Congress, you're going to become a millionaire just by showing up. What say you?
Well, I believe it was Thomas Sowell that actually said one time, we ought to pay members of the Senate and the House like $2 million a year just to make it a really good job. So potentially you could get some high quality people there that also wouldn't be trying, grift their way into.
I mean, AOC goes from,
all right, I just got a message saying our connection's weak. Anything we do about that, or we keep rolling?
I'm on Wildcatter's Wi-Fi.
Okay.
we do talk about how the election seemed to, no one can get it right on the voting panels, but digital wildcatters can't get their broadcast technology.
We're a high-tech platform.
Who do we blame?
I think we're frozen stream. Yeah, mine froze.
It does that, but
Okay.
frozen.
So we're good. All right.
Okay, keep going.
We'll jump back in. So something I noticed about this is the Republicans 4%, which arguably that's number one. So number two, and there we go. Okay. So could have been their red wave distributed better. So I think really you've got your candidate thing that you brought up, but the other thing you've got is this: Democrats are a lot better at tactics. I mean, they chose their races, they focused on those races, they got their voters out, and that breaks down a whole lot of stuff. One, messaging. I mean, I was sitting there going, why are they talking about abortion? Only 4% of the population cares about abortion. Well, guess what? Democrats cared about abortion, and it got young people out, right?
72% of the 18 to 29 demographic female voted in House races Democrat.
Yeah,
72%.
and they were way underrepresented in any of the polling too. And so they not only did they come out and vote overwhelmingly Democrat, number two, they actually showed up and voted.
You either had, I think, strong achievement track record, DeSantis in Florida, right, through their policies and the way they've managed through lockdowns, et cetera, or you had third rail issues in Texas like gun ownership and oil and gas. And, opposing that was a decidedly losing strategy. And I'm talking about on the Democrats' part. Those are two very different things than what we saw, I think, in candidates that were running against Democrat issues. And the Democrats, as Chuck points out, did a good job of focusing on, it ended up being a pretty big single issue voter swing.
I mean, while Beto is a millennial's wet dream in terms of celebrity status, he does not show well in terms of what is he going to do for the state. And I think that he is a poor candidate on the Democrat side.
Yeah, no, it's my favorite thing I heard was that we're getting so incredibly sensitive as a nation. I was down in Texas. You can't even call anybody a loser anymore. You got to call them a Beto. So, but what does this mean for us in the energy business? Looking through this lens, in that, I mean, the Republicans got obliterated by young people and single women.
Big
and
time.
If they're showing up to vote in this percentage this young, do more of them show up and vote? Are they uneducated? What does this mean for energy?
I think the inertia still holds in the short to medium term, where it doesn't, neither party has a mandate at any level with this type of result. But I do think the really what could be the start of a structural trend is one that needs to be closely examined. And as you point out, from a tactical standpoint, 2024 ought to be a real hyper focus for the Republicans, because that's the way things could potentially trend. It's one significant data point. But
I mean, Biden is saying that he has a mandate, and it's COP27. What do you think is going to happen over the next few years regarding oil and gas and renewables? Is it going to be still pressure? Are we going to hear oil and gas companies saying, "Hey, I cannot produce because I'm not getting the leases, I'm not getting the support, I can't raise the capital"? What's going to happen?
I mean, Biden was pretty clear, right? He's going to get rid of all the coal plants. I mean, he said that leading up to the election. And then number two, I mean, he also off camera, or thinking he was off camera, said, "Hey, there's been no drilling under my administration." You know, that was previous stuff. So, I mean, does he feel like he has a mandate for that now? And he'll have the Senate. I don't think he's going to have the House. But I mean,
as we're seeing rising prices in Europe, diesel fuel is in short supply. Germany just opened their first LNG import terminal. It took only supposedly 200 days. It was unbelievable. So that they're not relying as much on Russia. Well, who's the natural supplier of that? That would be the United States.
Right.
Are we going to be able to compete? Because the global markets are saying we need your gas, we need cheap electricity, energy. Are we going to do it or not?
I said it on the energy policy draft. You know, natural gas was my draft pick. I got the easy spot of choosing number one. I think the scale at which that is possible is going to require, on when I were talking to the show, that gas can be an offensive States or for North America or for the West, and achieve a lot of those objectives, like pushing out coal from both coasts. But left in the hands of of an industry versus government, which is a bit of a, I called it inertia. It's more of a standoff, right? Are you going to have the political will to move it in the direction it needs to go? I'm skeptical of that.
Okay, speaking of coal, let's go to Manchin. I mean, since we were talking about this earlier, what's going to happen with the FERC administrator and Manchin and that feud that's going on? You want to set it up?
Well, let's step back. So Biden gets into office. Biden is able to make a appointment to the FERC, which leads to a 3-2 Democratic FERC advantage. Mm-hmm. They, for the first time in 23 years, actually changed the rules for the approval process. And I'm going to bastardize this a little and big picture it a little, but they basically said, hey, you need to consider climate change and emissions in approving any project. So it's now an absolute thing that has to be looked at, not a relative thing. So if this pipeline is going to make it better than that pipeline, that's not good enough. It's, does this new pipeline or whatever the project is have any emissions, i.e., therefore we can vote no to the project. Well, so that right there, a lot of people said that truly studied the FERC said, we're never building another pipeline in the United States. I mean, we will not get FERC approval for it. And so what Manchin has done is it's Richard Glick, who was appointed for a second 5-year term in January by Biden. Manchin's basically said, I'm not going to hold a confirmation hearing on him in the Senate. So if that doesn't happen before the end of the year, the FERC's going to be 4 people, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and it takes 3 votes to get anything approved.
Gridlock.
Right. So,
and this is, not to get too much into the kind of sidebar drama around Manchin and what happened with the Inflation Reduction Act and getting him to, I don't know, capitulation is the right word, but the trade-off was, as I understand it, a promise of permitting reform. Yeah. Mountain Valley Pipeline was central to that in West Virginia, obviously. So now that it seems like there's a bit of bait and switch politically going on there, and maybe this is, his first kind of firing back at them. Again, at the highest level, I think it speaks to nothing really gets done or decided, or
Which is great.
or moves hard in one
Well,
direction.
When government doesn't do anything, we win.
Well,
Right? Don't
if
citizens
if
win?
you own existing assets that are producing, you win. If you want to go build a new export LNG terminal, you don't get that done.
No,
you don't
no.
get your approval, and Europe loses.
I mean, clearly, I think
yeah.
United States loses if we can't produce cheaper energy. I mean, that is every nation that thrives has cheap energy. And if our energy prices are going up because of government policy, that's a lose-lose.
So I was going to call at the end, our wild ass predictions. I'm going to go ahead and just say mine now since we're talking about it. So, and I actually have some insider scoop on this. I talked to some of my Politico friends. I've got something. So, particularly if Herschel wins his seat and we've got a 50-50 Senate, one of two things happens in the next 6 months. Manchin leaves the Democratic Party and goes to the Republican Party.
Or becomes an independent.
Or becomes an
Maybe.
independent but caucuses with the Republicans.
Sure.
Gives them a majority. Or number two, Manchin does not run again, and you see Manchin running a foundation of some sort for Bill Gates, making tens of millions of dollars a year, because Bill Gates actually went and visited Manchin 3 times in the run-up to the infrastructure bill. So there's at least some chatter in Washington that Manchin was said, hey, you vote for this, you don't run again. Because I think West Virginia was a 73% Trump state. So him winning as a Democrat next time is going to be really, really tough.
Have
like
we tracked Manchin's net worth since these meetings? We should.
Is this he has to go away and then come back?
I don't know. Maybe
Make his money and then come back.
So he's either going to become a Republican, and the Republic let him join with open arms, and or he will not run again. We see him running something for Bill Gates, making tens of millions a year. That's my wild ass prediction.
I'm going to go with it. That's awesome.
All righty. So what happens in the House? So let's assume the Republicans win. They get committee chairmanships. I mean, is it the investigation shit show, the daily drama? How's the House going to govern?
I think, just like you mentioned, that Biden claims he has a mandate, or this election gives them a mandate. I think Schumer said something in essence to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there's going to be a strong temptation in the House to do as much investigation or make as much investigation noise as possible. I just
accountability.
Yeah. I think, without control of the Senate, I think that's going to be a really, really difficult.
I mean, from my purview, there's
distraction.
There's very few Republicans that have balls. I mean, I think they're getting rich off of the kitty, which is you and me, by the way. Those of us that actually pay taxes. There's very few people. I mean, you've got, the governor DeSantis in Florida that's willing to push back and do whatever he wants, and it's actually working for him. But I think the House, sure, there's going to be some TV type of drama where there's going to be some investigations, but can you name very many Republicans in the House that actually have done what they say they're going to do?
Well, so the interesting thing about investigations is put what your political beliefs are aside. The January 6th commission worked for the Democrats. I mean, it just did. I have tons of Democratic friends on Facebook that are all talking about, oh my gosh, we saved our democracy for this. So, I mean,
we're not a democracy, but
yeah,
let's go with it.
Right.
Yeah, we'll go with it.
It worked at a minimum, engaging their base and turning their base out. Benghazi worked for the Republicans. I mean, Hillary already had really high negatives, but Benghazi hearings drove Hillary negatives even higher, thus, making it so that Trump. So it is an effective tool. It's a shitty tool. I don't want my politicians using it, but unfortunately, that's the game.
This is what I think January 6th did. What January 6th did was a warning. Be careful. That's to me why January 6th is still an issue. Is it wasn't really, I don't think it was that big of a deal, but it was an issue saying, hey, if you complain, if you start questioning, the same thing could happen to you. That's how it worked, in my opinion. And that to me is scary, but true.
I mean, it is interesting to sit there and think that you've had the FBI be able to get warrants to spy on a political opponent based on opposition research by the party in power.
Right.
So, I mean, that's kind of crazy to me. It's crazy to me that 50 former intelligence officers all came out and said the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, when even the New York Times today says it wasn't. I mean, the FBI had the laptop and didn't say anything about it before the election and all. And, obviously with the pandemic and COVID, there was a lot in the way of kind of what I'll call misinformation by our government. It's kind of shocking to see young people just so enthralled with our government and so believing in our government and trusting in our government, when you would have thought, given all this, there would have been a lot of cynicism about it. So anyway, that's my soapbox.
With congressional approval ratings probably the lowest in their history. So there's a disconnect there as well.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not my congressman, it's everybody else's.
Yeah,
and so,
I agree.
But I think the notion of kind of the chilling effect that you alluded to, with really elevating that as an emotional issue to think about, they're saying the quiet part out loud, where it may be something is off the cuff. I don't know if you saw where the president was asked to comment on Elon Musk and whether national security threat investigation is warranted. He danced around it, but he also didn't.
He didn't dance that far around it.
Right.
I think what we're seeing is, let's just call it what it is. We live in a cancel culture, and people are scared. And when you look at that, this is not. We have, we both were talking about how we have kids in college. This is not a meritocracy anymore. People are scared. You don't earn your way. You have to look this way, talk this way, think this way to be rewarded. And that is what is scary. I mean, Paul Graham posted a funny article that most regretted college majors, percentage of graduates who would pick a different major if they could, journalism by far number one at 87%.
Oh, wow.
And remember, when I was younger, I remember journalism majors would say, well, my professors in business school would say, like, the reason, those that couldn't make it in the business world are journalism majors. But journalism majors back then used to say, I want to report the news. Today, what do you hear journalism majors say? I want to change the world. But it's a narrative. Like, we live in narratives now. We don't live in meritocracy. And that is something that I think almost everything we're talking about comes down to, what's the narrative? Why did the Republicans lose? The wrong narrative.
Yeah. And then, I think the Republicans in the House have been weaker in terms of how they play the political game, and you particularly in the House, because you're running for re-election every other year. They want to be nice and get along for the most part. They don't want to be called names. They don't want to be canceled.
Yeah, I remember when Dan Crenshaw was running, and he had this real strong, and he won. When he won his seat. Well, Dan Crenshaw's over in Ukraine. What's he doing with Zelensky? Like, what? Like, we're as I watch sort of our politicians do what they do, I'm like, what's their intent here? Is it to serve the people, or is it to, and I don't want to be too conspiracy theory, but I'm just watching the behaviors going, this is not what I used to observe as a fan of politics from a young age.
So let's you brought up Ukraine. The story that's coming out today, and I think Ken Griffin,
like that segue?
Yeah, kind of like that. Kind of led the Ken Griffin of Citadel led the charge on this, basically saying, FTX implosion. When you look at dollars, it's U.S. government gives dollars to Ukraine. Ukraine was giving dollars to FTX. FTX was giving dollars to the Democrats. Sam Bankman-Fried was the second largest Democratic donor behind Soros during this midterm cycle. And I think he even had a line item on his financials that said defeat Trump or something to that effect. This is wild because, I mean, you put on the tinfoil hat and you start talking about, you know, is this why there was no regulation on crypto type stuff? Was this, I mean, I guess the benevolent explanation is we were giving campaign contributions to lobby for no regulation and all, or was just flat out money laundering?
This is the biggest story, I think, in the world right now. I mean, it affects energy markets, it affects it all. You've got a kid that's only been in the workforce now for 8 years. He graduates MIT, goes to Jane, is a trader, leaves, and starts a sort of crypto thing. He's only been doing it for a few years. And all of a sudden, he has billions and billions of dollars. But if you start unpacking Alameda, which is his trading firm that traded all the crypto coins called FTT that FTX was representing, it was upside down the whole time. Like there was nothing about this that even remotely looks.
Well, they were painting the tape as one of the allegations, right? Before they offered to the public.
That's correct.
Right. So
I think there's something that needs to be unwound here and investigated. And I hope a journalism major, no offense to you journalism majors, write something mean about me on Twitter. Go investigate that. We need more data on what's really happening, how much money was moved around, who's involved.
Is this finally big enough that we kind of drag the mainstream media kicking and screaming into this investigation?
I hope so, but I don't really have a lot of respect for
it's been surprisingly underreported, right? Or underinvestigated relative to, the journalists. We used to say in equity research, it's great to be first, but you better have something to say. And so I would think, as potentially media as this is, there might be, everybody's all about their own celebrity now, but you're the one that's getting to the bottom of this, or there are more nefarious things going on behind that you're that are keeping you from doing your investigative duty.
Look, if I was an investigative journalist, my biggest fear would be this is another Epstein. The closer I get to Epstein, people just start falling off dead. I don't want to get too close to this one because there's too much. Because when you look at if you watch some of his interviews, you read more about Sam. He's just not that credible. He's a smart kid, but I'm like, there's just way too much money went through his hands. And as a guy that studied accounting, which was no fun, but I just start looking at all the lack of controls. I'm thinking, why would this kid have so much control over billions and billions of dollars? And he had back doors and he was giving loans. I'm like, it just doesn't add up unless there are some ulterior motives here.
So two things on that front. One, John Jacoby, the old crusty guy that managed the Stevens family for money, used to always say, oh, hell, every bank goes broke at some point. Doesn't matter whether you regulate them or not, which is true.
Okay,
I mean,
fair,
it's a bad business model, right? You take in assets in the form of deposits, et cetera, that people can withdraw at any moment, and then you turn around and give loans out that are 5-year paybacks on cars and stuff. So, I mean, the run on the bank does happen. The other thing you see written about this guy is they say he was phenomenally charming. And, when you get into kind of these new things, because I lived through the internet bubble. I mean, you get the whole, the old folks don't get it. It's a new age. I remember when, the railroad had a valuation of like $1 billion, and the exchange that was going to load all the railroads had a valuation of $20 billion. And, we're asset light, et cetera. So, there could be an innocent explanation for it, but
have you noticed though, if you go back, internet being another one, a great one, or the mortgage crisis, it seems that the people that have been around the longest time and they ask you and you're like, you just don't get it, Dad. You don't understand the internet. Like valuation on no assets, like it should be worth $1 billion for nothing. They were right.
Yeah.
It's like I lived in Austin at the time, but I started seeing banks on every single corner. And I was like, is there a bank everywhere? Every single corner had 2 banks, 3 banks, 4 banks. I was like, they need money for a reason because they're loaning it out in a way that made no sense. Too many people had mortgages. And all of a sudden it came crumbling down and people were like, why would you ever finance long-term assets with short-term debt? My economics professor taught me this.
Yeah.
Like people have been talking about this for a long time. So Sam, he's charming, sure. But like, again, crypto, another one of these things. It's like, let's start putting the fundamental questions in play and you'll realize like it doesn't make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, you should.
Yeah. 15% loans don't make sense. That's equity. You know, you can say,
Exactly.
I don't care what the interest rate says or what it is. One other fact I want to throw out real quick, and then we're going to get to predictions, winners and losers. But I was talking to a very highly regarded energy investor, and I'm going to kind of booger this up to protect names, but basically had a large investor withdraw, even though performance has been really good for this fund, even though on very good terms with the investor withdrew because of fear for the tail. So it was kind of like, hey, I get that because the model was basically more equity based as opposed to a distribution based model in energy. The investor's like, I'm scared 3 to 5 years you're regulated out of business. And so when we sit here, you'll see the political debate online on Twitter potentially where it's, the government's screwing us. Well, no, it's not. It's really investors that are demanding this. I think the investors are part looking at the government going, no, you're going to be regulated out of business. Your tail is truly at risk.
I don't know if you saw, maybe it's related or not, but Point 72 apparently has introduced or is introducing, that's Steve Cohen's renamed firm, an 8.33% gate, meaning you can only get 8 1/3% of your funds out in any given quarter. And if you don't sign up for those new terms, you're out as an LP. So is that, in anticipation of what's going on, it seems like it might have had a longer runway to be able to put something like that together. There's more to it than that, but yeah, it is. I think it is to avoid that.
All righty. So let's do this. All right, I'm going to go around. We're going to go biggest winner. So, Kirk, you're up first. Who out of all this stuff is your biggest winner from election 2022?
I hate to say it, but the government's the biggest winner, and that's the sad fact. So that's who I think won this election cycle. The government won, especially big government. And so that to me is a saddened truth. I don't think the citizens won in this election.
I had on my list, kind of as I was pondering who the biggest winner was, trust in government. So basically the same thing. I mean,
yeah, the fact that only one state in the entire union had one election on one day, all the votes were counted, and there's no questions.
Yeah,
we can't say that. Here in Harris County, there's Abbott's now pissed, which thanks Abbott for being a week late. But you see Arizona, you see Nevada. I think the citizens lost.
Mark, who's your big winner?
I think Democrat strategist was the big winner. I think they proved that targeted single issue strategies can activate a meaningful, and in this case, it ought to give some pause because it is the youngest and I guess highest growth or more long-term wedge of the Democratic base. So that works with that demographic. So the Democrat strategists who pulled this off, focusing on those single issues in key areas, I think were the big winners.
And I actually had that on my list too. I called it Democratic tactics.
Yeah.
The actual turnout
I promise I
machine.
didn't look at your notes.
Exactly. Well, no, we did not share notes. My big winner for this, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She gets elected to be the governor of Arkansas. So she's going to be there the next 2 years. She's going to sit out the presidential race in 2024. She's not going to run for that. She's not going to be in the middle of that shit show, whatever it turns out, Trump, DeSantis. She is good with the Trump wing of the party because she served loyally as the press secretary for Trump, but she gets to make her own case over the next 4 years being. And so I think in 6 years, you have the first woman president of America. And I think it's Sarah Huckabee Sanders. All right.
Wow.
Kirk, who is your biggest loser?
Wow. I think the biggest loser is Lena Hidalgo. She won, but I think as her lieutenants are all indicted, I think she's going to be the biggest loser. Not today, but over the next month or two, you're going to see. At least that's my prediction.
Mark, who's your biggest loser out of this?
Wow, that was out of left field. The easy answer is
this brain doesn't work correctly.
Yeah, the easy answer is MAGA, but I think it's more fundamental than that. I think, as we were discussing prior to the start of the show, I think the economic reality that's beset, the generations that are going to be here and live with these results and consequences longer, the policy consequences are the biggest losers because we don't have a clear mandate one way or the other in a push toward creating effective in our echo chamber of energy. We don't have that.
And I said that. I mean, I said that the citizens lost because we have abundant energy. We're not using it and leveraging it. And so we have inflation. We have citizens worried about, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, these sort of top issues that really don't seem to matter when we have these major issues. We have crime. We have inflation. We have people that really, a single family, one wage can't earn a living for the entire family anymore. I mean, that's the biggest loser. The citizens are the biggest losers. I just threw Lena under the bus because it's fun. So it is the citizens.
And I think it is that, that kind of early career, early adult wedge of the population, whether it's the overlap between millennials and Gen Z, because I think this inertia is bad for getting to a place where we can set effective bipartisan policy. Not to put too naive of a term on it, but energy policy is a big part of that, right? In what we've tried to focus on here, which is what does this all mean for energy and energy policy? But I think because that wedge of the population was successful in voting single issue, we're not moving forward and making hard decisions on policy areas that impact their lives most directly. That's, I think, somehow wrapped up in the citizens.
I don't know if it was a parody account, but on Twitter, somebody tweeted, he's like, I love $10 gas. He's like, vote blue because I can afford it. I'm like, that's got to be parody. But if that's the real thought process, and we're doomed.
Well, I mean, I think where it goes to is we just haven't been able to educate on the consequences of policy and price. It's been lost in stuff you and I have talked about on BDE, and you and I have talked about on BDE, that's evil oil companies and the like. The actual biggest loser of this election, and I am so glad to finally put the death nail in this, Hillary Clinton. Because Joe Biden did not suffer a red wave. I mean, Biden actually can claim to be the biggest winner out of this. He was supposed to lose all these seats, and I just lost the House. I mean, even though that's a bigger deal. But Biden gets,
and we'll see by how much, which isn't very much.
So Biden gets to run again, which he's going to do, and that means Hillary will not challenge him. And it's over. There will never be another Hillary Clinton campaign. So she is the biggest loser. All right, guys, this was fun. So we've deep dived the election. Appreciate you guys coming on. we've got one.
You got
last
one. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
What's your
so
wild
I
ass
already
No,
did my
you-
wild ass.
Let's keep it in
prediction,
order.
I've got a wild ass prediction.
All right, go ahead.
And I'm
Kirk.
again left field, but I am saying that Japan makes out of Group E in the 2022 FIFA World Cup. They've got Spain, Costa Rica, and Germany to play against, but I'm saying Japan makes it out of group stage. That's my wild ass guess, and I'm putting money on it.
Wow.
I would say Jeff Luno's coming back as GM, but focusing on the subject at hand, if Trump doesn't ultimately get shoved out to where he runs an independent campaign in 2024, I think there's enough get along in the House, especially that they're, one of the extreme possibilities here, very remote, would be they proceed with would it be the third round of articles of impeachment?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that would ultimately, with success, disqualify him from running in 2024. Do the rhinos kind of play that game to get, to reunify the party if there is such a possibility? But one way or the other, there's going to be a fracture, whether it's potentially Trump running as an independent, or do they get him out of the way and his voter bloc remains intact and fragmented from the rest of the Republican Party, which also makes it easier for Joe Biden to run for re-election.
Again, there
And
you
the
have
Astros are going to repeat, by the way.
There you
Wow.
go. All right, Digital Wildcatters, thank you for joining us on our debrief on the election. We thought we'd actually be able to talk about more, but there's still stuff up in the air, so we may have to do this episode again in December. Appreciate everybody tuning in today. Do everything you do for podcasts, subscribe, write favorable comments about it. Peace out.